Here we go.
It's time for
It is.
the podcast.
It is. It's time for our second episode.
We still have not planned any intro because we're professionals.
Indeed. Well, like the YouTube version last week, we can just use a quote from the movie.
Yeah, that'll probably be how we start off each and every one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is To Infinity and Beyond. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Jarron.
And we are here to talk about A Bug's Life.
Indeed. Pixar's second film.
Second feature film, admittedly.
Feature film, yeah.
We're still not talking about the shorts because we're terrible.
We are, and we don't have enough time.
Yeah, this is only like 20 weeks now.
Yup.
We gotta
Anyway, so I think for this one, we should begin talking about the plot of the film.
Right. So, I guess just quick details in case anybody needs them, but A Bug's Life, 1998 film, directed by John Lasseter, co-directed by Andrew Stanton, who would go on to be important at Pixar for the next decade.
Absolutely.
And then he made John Carter.
He did, and then he came back to Pixar, but we'll talk about that later in X amount of weeks.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a while. So, you sound like you already have, how you want to talk about this planned out. Let's go ahead and start.
I have it mentally. I haven't written it down, but so our plot begins on Ant Island, a colony of ants led by the Queen and her daughter or granddaughter. I don't remember.
Daughter.
Yeah. And she's in waiting to become the new queen. All the while, the grasshoppers come, and they come and eat the food. But there's a plan hatched to gather up warrior bugs to fight off the grasshoppers so the ants can have their freedom.
Yeah, that's a pretty good, just basic summary of what happens. Mm-hmm. So, this movie, I watched it for the first time this year.
Really?
Yeah. It's been on my list of Pixar movies I had not seen, along with such classics as Cars 2 and Cars 3.
Well, I'll tell you what, this was the first movie I ever saw in a theater, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I believe so.
How old were you?
I was 98. I was 2 years old.
You can remember that?
Okay, I don't remember actually seeing it, but I remember being told that it was my first I saw.
Okay.
Yeah. I do remember seeing The Phantom Menace after that. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, so we're both coming at it from very different angles, I guess, because I'm very fresh on this one, even more so than I was for Toy Story. I had at least seen Toy Story when I was still a kid.
Yeah.
And you can't remember a time before you've seen this movie.
Yeah.
So, I guess we just kind of jump in since I watched it very, very recently before rewatching it for this. Do you want to know my initial thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So, I told you last week, I wasn't really a fan of this one. It was.
Yeah.
When I first got to it, I had seen pretty much every other Pixar movie before this one, so this one felt more like a skeleton of a Pixar film than an actual Pixar film. And in fairness, very early for them. They're still forming an identity at this time.
Absolutely.
But I was just not very taken with the characters. I didn't really care that much about the story, so the whole thing just kind of fell a little flat to me. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the first time? Can you talk about the first time you remember seeing this film?
I don't remember.
You don't
I
remember the
remember
first time you
enjoying it.
remember?
It wasn't a big a deal in my mind as like Toy Story or even like Monsters Inc. or but it was something I did enjoy as a film. I remember having a lot of the toys and figures of the characters. So it was a thing I did enjoy.
When I was younger, I was like aware of the characters because I don't know if you've been to like Disney World in Animal Kingdom. There's like a Bug's Life attraction.
Really, I've never been to Disney World, so
yeah. So it's this like little 4D theater type thing where you sit in the chairs and like Flick and a bunch of other characters from the film will talk to you and you'll get sprayed by bug acid and other stuff.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I had like a vague understanding of who the characters were before I ever sat down to watch this film.
Huh. I always had the assumption that this was just one of those films that Disney kind of pretended didn't exist.
Well,
Not like Hunchback of Notre Dame or Song of the South, but
well,
I just figured this is one of the ones they didn't like acknowledge very often.
Well, I think it gets acknowledged less because it's just not as merchandisable. Like, not many people want to buy bug toys.
Yeah. I don't know. I know a lot of kids who like bugs.
Fair, but... I mean, like, outside of that one attraction at Animal Kingdom, I don't know... Like, I was there a couple of years ago. I don't remember seeing any A Bug's Life toys. Plenty of Cars, plenty of Incredibles, plenty of Toy Story, Monsters, Inc., but... Yeah, I think this one was just... never all that profitable after it, sold tickets in the theater. Like, it made money then, but...
There's something big we can talk about behind the scenes, but I don't know when you want to get to that.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, because...
Yeah.
I think we can save that for a little bit.
A partial reason why I think people may not be as aware of this film as they should be. But we'll get that later. Back to the story, though.
All right, so you gave the broad strokes. The main details would be our boy Flick. He's not like all the other ants. They want to do things traditionally. They don't like challenging the status quo.
He's a quirky inventor.
Yep. that we're already getting into like part of my problem with this. And it's kind of just like that Flick is so standard, kind of like a boring protagonist to me.
He is. He's not like Woody or Buzz or Mike, Sully, Remy, any of the popular Pixar protagonists.
Yeah.
He's just kind of there.
It really comes across to me like his main character traits are his optimism and his inventiveness, and that's pretty much all he's got. And it kind of doesn't help that the first few minutes of the movie have him like screwing up and ruining everything.
Yeah, it's one of those stories.
Yeah, it's part of what I mean when I say like they were still figuring out their identity. Like maybe this particular plot wasn't as overused in the 90s, but like you have your main character screws up everything and has to fix it. You have your misunderstandings. You have your liar revealed.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
I have some things to say about that.
Yeah. I got pretty much a couple of notes about every section of this film. So we can start at the beginning. Was there anything, like just at the beginning of the film, you wanted to talk about?
Well, the thing I like most about this movie is the scope of it. It feels really cinematic.
There were a lot of shots that were making me think, yeah, they were definitely like thinking, theater in mind.
Yeah. A lot of money went into it, and a lot of innovations went into the filmmaking. The amount of extra ants in the background.
Yeah, I remember
that was unheard of.
Yeah, I always remember hearing like they could only do 50, and like when they first started out, they could only do 50 in a crowd, and they were like, well, we need a lot more than that, and so they had to push the technology beyond its limits to really make it happen.
Which is similar to what we were saying about Toy Story last week, in that the technology does not the technology doesn't make the film good, but the film itself pushes the technology to make the film better.
Oh yeah, and I think that's going to be the case for a lot of these early Pixar films because, like, outside of Toy Story, I don't think any other CG animated films came out before A Bug's Life outside of the one we'll talk about later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this was still very early into CG as like a legitimate animation powerhouse. So, like, pretty much every Pixar movie is going to have massive innovations to go with it up until probably Cars will be the first one where they didn't have to do anything like major in order to get the movie made.
Yeah. And even then, Cars is a pretty good looking film in terms of the environments.
Yeah.
Which is very close to this film being beautiful to look at still. The environments are still wonderful looking.
A lot of them are. There were still like a few things like you can tell they didn't quite have sand down yet.
Yeah.
And part of that is just because so many tiny particles is going to kill you in rendering. Like you can tell a lot of those textures were I don't want to say like slapped on there, but they were definitely done in such a way as to make it easy to render those backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's very cinematic. John Lasseter envisioned the film as being in the style of an epic, which is interesting in that A Bug's Life is, in some ways, a loose adaptation of Seven Samurai.
A loose adaptation.
It's loose, but it's about,
I mean, as loose as Lion King is about Hamlet.
Yeah. It's thematically similar. May not be an adaptation, but I feel like the large scale, which is ironic given the characters are bugs, of the story kind of evokes that kind of classic epic cinema feel. But I also really enjoy the comedy in the film, the dialogue.
There were a lot of just like really well constructed jokes throughout this thing.
Yeah.
One of the ones that got me early on that I don't remember even noticing when I first watched the film. It's like right after Flick had destroyed the offering plate. You just have that one shot of him going, "Oh no." And then it hard cuts to him just like making a beeline for the anthill screaming.
Yeah.
And like that was just like such a wake up call to me who was already like ready to zone out almost. Like
Yeah.
like and just in general, like a lot of the humor is well timed, well put together. I don't know if I laughed nearly as much as I laughed when I was like watching Toy Story, but it definitely got me in a few places.
Yeah. And the voice acting is great in it.
Oh yeah. I don't think any voice is nearly as memorable as Woody or Buzz, but at the same time,
of course.
At the same time, those characters have had so much more than just the one movie.
Yeah. Well, Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Princess Ada. Seinfeld, it was very big at the time. There's a lot of characters who are played by 90s sitcom icons.
That's interesting.
Yeah, David Hyde Pierce voiced the walking stick. He was on Frasier, that show. I love Frasier. Who else was that? I'm trying to remember. I'll get back to the voice cast later.
Let's see, we have Dave Foley. Hopper has an appropriate voice actor.
That's right. I was intentionally not bringing that one up.
Let's see. Phyllis Diller, Richard Kind. Yeah, just a lot of like really good.
Yeah, just good comedians.
Yeah. I think one of the writers, because I was looking at the background of this film, I think one of the writers for this film was also a writer on a few episodes of Seinfeld.
That sounds about right.
Like, that might explain it. I'm not gonna take like 5 minutes to figure it out who it was.
It was a very 90s comedic type movie.
Yeah.
And as you're saying earlier, there are...
Sorry, I was just gonna say right down to the blooper reel ending.
Yeah.
Like, that just struck me as like a very 90s thing to do. You don't really see that anymore. For animated films, at least. I think Surf's Up was the last one to do it.
Wow, that's a deep cut. There are tropes and cliches in this movie. The liar reveal cliche.
Yeah,
mentioned.
That has been the bane of Western animation. Just for the last 2-3 decades.
Well, we should explain why that cliche is in there. If you haven't seen the movie, spoilers. So Flick goes out into the world to gather up warrior bugs to fight off the grasshoppers. And he encounters circus performers. There's a spider and a stick bug and a butterfly and all these other colorful characters. And he mistakes them for warriors when in reality they're circus performers. And so it's revealed much later on that he had been lying to the other ants about them being warriors. And then there's that whole, there's that moment, like there is in so many other films, animated films, 90s films. Oh no, you lied to us. How could you do that?
And then they just spend a little bit of time mopey.
Yeah.
But it's okay, because Dot gave him a rock. And then he got his groove back.
Yep. You know who else hates the liar reveal cliche?
Well, I mean, everyone and their mother, but I know who you're talking about specifically.
There is one specific person who will go unnamed.
But who basically made a career out of complaining about it.
Reveal cliche!
People without any context are going to just be confused right now.
Yeah. It'd be much better if we were in costume reenacting the movie.
Oh, don't even. Okay, so... Yeah, like... And it does this... The movie does this thing that all these stories do, where to perpetuate the misunderstanding, the characters just don't communicate, or are going to say things in a way that they would never say them otherwise.
Like, it'd be so much easier for someone just to, talk to each other.
Yeah, and I mean, like, granted, they kind of play around with that cliche, because they do have Flick explain everything, but to the two bugs who don't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but, like, the moment that annoyed me the first time I saw it, and annoyed me again here, was just... when he's trying to recruit the bugs, he says, "I've been scouting for people of your talent," or whatever. And it's like, that's what makes them think he's a talent scout. And
yeah,
like, I don't think
their next big break.
Like, I don't think unless you were specifically writing a character to say that Flick would ever be like say it that way.
Yeah.
And like, it's just one of those things that has to happen in order to have the story the way you're having it.
And therein lies, I think, some of the problems of this film. Even though I enjoy it, it's not perfect. It's not like Toy Story, where last week we didn't really have a lot to say because we both just say that's a good film.
Oh yeah, they're just... There are moments where you can tell that it just wasn't as perfectly constructed as Toy Story, and like...
Yeah.
maybe it was just a case of they had this idea and about the misunderstanding, and the film would just unravel without that.
Mm-hmm.
Or they'd have to really rework things, and they just did not have the time. Probably because they were working on this film and Toy Story 2 at the same time, which would have been a first for Pixar.
Yeah.
So that their resources were probably spread thin. John Lasseter was pulling double duty directing this and Toy Story 2, so...
Yeah. And Toy Story 2 has a very interesting production story, which we'll get to next week.
yeah.
One thing about this film that I quite enjoy, as I do with other Pixar films, I love the idea of other worlds within our own.
Yeah, that is definitely something that was a recurring theme pretty much up until Cars was the one that stopped doing it, really.
Yeah. I mean, The Incredibles is kind of debatable because it is kind of like...
Yeah, it's definitely not another world within our own. It's really its own reality, but at the same time, you have the regular world of normal people, and then the world where all the supers are like living their, lives and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and
I mean, like Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Monsters Inc. They debatably take place in our world, but just with things kind of. Monsters Inc. It's like another dimension or something almost, but that's neither here nor there. They're close to our reality, and they're more relatable. And Incredibles has human characters, which makes it more relatable. Even like Ratatouille does this as well with the rat community.
Yeah, it really was like, Cars that broke the trend. Gosh darn it, Cars.
Yeah. Cars. But one thing I really like about this one is I like the city location, which is really just like a pile of trash.
Yeah, I really wish we saw more of the city, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I understand they probably couldn't spend all the time designing it, and I'm sure it was a beast to render and animate and all of that.
All the light sources.
Yeah, but we get a handful of shots of Flick in the city, and then he just kind of disappears into this little bar. And the bar is where we spend the rest of our time in the city. Even then, it's
a fun location.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bugified bar, so it works. It's just...
The poo-poo platter, that's a funny joke.
Grade A humor.
Oh, and positive, the blood type.
Alright, so that one didn't really make me laugh because I got the same joke from the Bee Movie, and I saw Bee Movie first.
That's interesting. Because this came first.
Yeah, this one came first, so it in theory should have a leg up over Bee Movie, but in my mind, where I saw Bee Movie first and A Bug's Life second.
Yeah.
It's weird. I think it's better in a Bee Movie just because it goes a little bit weirder. Like one of the characters is a mosquito, and he's like a junkie who gets off on wolf blood because of all the adrenaline.
Yeah.
And that's just way more weirder to me. So it's just a little funnier.
Yeah. So we should get on to the characters now.
Yeah, we really should. We talked about Flick a little.
Yeah, so we can...
I don't know if there's really much more to say about him.
Yeah, he's just kind of the protagonist. He is the protagonist.
Yes, he is. Who would you say is your favorite character?
I personally I like all the circus bugs in particular, but I do like the walking stick the best.
He gets a lot of good jokes.
I just think those bugs are cool in general.
Yeah,
he's a fun character.
I feel like a lot of them are mostly made out of gimmicks, and I get that it's a short movie already, you can't develop all of them.
Yeah.
I think my favorite character might have to be Hopper, honestly.
Yeah, okay, so he's one of Pixar's, true villains.
Yeah, and what I found like really, really interesting about him is that he's kind of motivated by fear in a way.
Yeah,
Like he understands the ants can overpower the grasshoppers, and that's why he wants to keep them in line because he's legitimately afraid of them.
yeah.
Like his whole speech in the bar is probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Oh, it's good. It's really good.
Yeah. And I mean, he doesn't have a lot of personality outside of that, but I think it's just like such an interesting motivation. You don't really
Yeah,
you don't really see like that covered in any depth with villains. He's not the best villain in Pixar though.
no,
Probably the most underrated, but not the best.
probably.
Because the best is easily in Cars 2.
Absolutely. You can find the best of anything in Cars 2.
Cars 2 is the pinnacle.
Peak cinema.
I can't wait till we
watch
talk
real
about it.
films.
Last week we were like, yeah, we could probably skip Cars 2. And this week we're like, Cars 2, we worship at the altar of your feet.
Well, as I told you the other day, going through the list, we will hit Cars 2 around Christmas, like Christmas Eve, if we keep recording on Tuesdays.
Which is perfect, and I love it.
As I put it to you, it's the Christmas gift from your uncle, your great uncle, who doesn't know you very well. He just assumes you like cars and spies.
Yep. Oh, man.
Thanks, Uncle Steve. Jarron Gravely may or may not have an Uncle Steve.
Oh, man. We're doing it again. We're off A Bug's Life.
Yeah, we are. Back to the characters.
Yeah, so Hopper's probably my favorite in the film. I guess out of the circus bugs, I think I like Francis the most.
Yeah, he's funny.
Yeah.
The ladybug.
Yeah, there was one character touch I really liked, where whenever he's like thinking about something and trying to be quick about it, he like smacks his lips a couple of times, like.
Yeah.
Like he only does that a few times throughout the film, but I thought it was like just a nice little, a touch, like something to make him feel more real.
Yeah, I like it when they do stuff like that. There's the pill bugs, those guys.
Yep, they're probably the mostly used for slapstick, I think, in the film.
Yeah, they're funny. Those bugs, I can say about a lot of these characters, these bugs are cool in real life. So they have unique little traits.
Yeah. Well, we count the PT Flea as one of the circus bugs, even though he's technically not part of the warrior crew.
Yeah, I think he is.
Because he kind of gave me Mr. Krabs vibes, honestly.
He did.
But he was fun.
Yeah,
and he was
course,
he was the only one, when he saw a gigantic bird, he didn't run away. He grabbed a match and said, I'm going to light this thing on fire.
He's got guts.
Yeah, for a greedy little scab, he definitely does.
A flea. And, of course, he's voiced by Mr. John Ratzenberger, who would go on, after Toy Story and this, to be in every single Pixar film since, in some kind of role.
Very nice.
I feel like in some of them he only had maybe one or two lines, but in others he was kind of like a minor character. I mean, Ham is a very popular character in the Toy Story films.
Oh, yeah. We'll just have to make a little point to mention all of his characters as we go through these films.
Yeah. All right, well, I feel like that's the characters.
Well, we didn't talk about, Princess Ada or Dot or anything.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like they're still pretty kind of generic almost, just in the name of keeping this film simple, but I think they do have more going on than Flick does.
This might be getting ahead of ourselves for when we get to Toy Story 2, but I remember reading about John Lasseter's wife wanted Jessie to be a character in order to have a stronger female character than in Toy Story, the first one, and A Bug's Life.
Yeah, because I mean, Dot affects the plot in a lot of like big ways, and I feel like she's probably their strongest female character at this point.
Yeah.
But Princess Ada doesn't really contribute much to the movie outside of um, being like an authority figure that needs to be won over and a love interest for Flick.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it's still better than what Bo Peep got in the first Toy Story,
Yeah.
where she was just a love interest.
Do you think they'll make a Bug's Life 2 where she's like a strong, independent character?
I mean, by the end of the film, she already like made it to independence. Like she was.
Oh yeah, and she stands up to Hopper. I remember.
Yeah, like she gets her moments. It's just a case of throughout the most of the film she doesn't have that. Whereas with Bo Peep, she was like never a big part of Toy Story until the fourth movie.
Yeah.
Like they wrote her out of the third one pretty easily.
Yeah. Oh, she was just given away.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that now we're talking about Toy Story stuff.
Yep.
I was just gonna
You
say
have 3 more chances to do that.
Yeah, I will save my Bo Peep comments for. I guess for this one I'll have to save it for Toy Story 3.
Yeah.
So, are there any other characters we're missing? Like there are a few like minor ant characters who reoccur throughout the film. I love that the Queen has like a little aphid that's basically a corgi.
Yeah. That's cute. I like that.
That's
The
topical.
Queen's funny. The Queen is a comedy riot.
Yeah, the Queen is pretty awesome. She's just okay. I take back what I said about Dot. The Queen is the best female character in Pixar at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's the best.
The Queen.
Queen. And I guess we could mention a few more things about Dot, because I think her relationship with Flick was pretty cute. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of big brother, like. No, they were each other's only friend.
Pretty much, because Dot just got picked on a bunch, which is kind of nuts to me that the princess is getting made fun of by the other kids.
Yeah. This ant colony has some bizarre...
I mean, that's one of the most unique ideas this movie has, though. And I will praise it for that, because that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, and it's also just nice, because, characters in fiction who are generally like queens really get like a bad rap, almost.
Mm-hmm.
So like the fact that this movie has a queen who's just like funny and insightful and knowledgeable on top of things, pretty cool-headed, like, and like isn't like abusing power or anything. That's also pretty cool. Good on you, Pixar, for subverting expectations.
Indeed.
Back in the 90s when you could subvert expectations and people wouldn't get mad.
Let's not go there.
We won't. So let's see. I'm just looking through whatever notes I have. There was one thing. So like the character animation is pretty consistent throughout the movie.
Yeah.
But one thing that was bothering me a little bit was the eyelids. Like, I don't know if you noticed this, but like just they're animated in such a way that you can tell they're not connected to any other part of the character's face. It's like the eyelids will move, but like no other part around the eye reacts to the fact that these muscles are moving. And sometimes they'll move like independently of each other. Like one will blink a little faster than the other. Like it just came off a little uncanny. And I don't think this will bother like anybody who watches the film, except now that you've heard me say it, you'll probably notice it a lot.
Yeah.
But it was just a little weird, and I don't know if that was just like a quirk they were trying to give the characters, because like, hey, they're bugs, maybe their eyelids move different, or maybe it was just like an animation thing, like they hadn't quite figured out how to make this work for these character models.
I mean, this is still early days.
Oh yeah, their animation is going to be rough up until probably Cars or Ratatouille is where it pretty much gets consistently great.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's The Incredibles has like its human things. Finding Nemo has a few the human character designs that aren't quite great. Same with Monsters Inc. in a way. But I guess that's just what this film was saddled with. Either they ran out of time to correct it, or they thought it would be like a neat little gimmick, and it didn't quite work for me.
Yeah.
Because I have not like looked a lot into like the details of this film the way I have with Toy Story.
Yeah. I mean, granted, this just isn't, as iconic.
Yeah, like nobody talks about this one. Like, there's a reason when Andrew Stanton came back to Pixar to make a sequel to save his career, he did not choose A Bug's Life.
Yeah.
He chose his popular film.
Yeah.
I don't know. If they made a sequel to A Bug's Life, do you think it would do well?
I don't know. I think some people have enough fondness for it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, parents will take their kids to see anything with the Pixar's name on it. Except The Good Dinosaur.
Really anything animated.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, like, it's been so long. Like, this would be, if they made, like, a sequel and it came out tomorrow, it would be the longest gap between a Pixar film and its sequel.
Yeah.
And I feel like just a lot of kids today who would be the target demographic would not have really grown up with this film. Like, maybe they caught it on DVD because their parents bought all the Pixar films.
Yeah.
But I feel like they would have seen Cars or Monsters, Inc. or Finding Nemo or the Toy Stories way more than they would have watched A Bug's Life. Not that this film, like, deserves that. I know I said I didn't particularly care for it my first time through. I softened to it a bit on this watch through.
Mm-hmm.
Like, enough to, like, ranking movies is stupid, but my lizard brain does it anyway. But I probably gave it like a 4 out of 10 on my first viewing. I'd probably bump that up to a 5 out of 10 now.
Yeah. I feel like I'd give it like a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, like, that kind of stuff, it all depends on, like, how much it appeals to you. Like, give it whatever number you feel it deserves, but I feel like a 5 is pretty much how I sit on this one, just because, like, there is good things in here, like, a lot of good things in here, but yeah. I just don't think that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
Whereas with Toy Story, the whole was much greater than the sum of its parts.
Absolutely. Should we get into the production segment now?
Oh yeah, we need to talk about this.
We need to talk.
So, Jeffrey frickin' Katzenberg,
as we discussed last week, is something of a control freak.
Yeah, and a bit of an edgelord, apparently.
Because edgy was his buzzword on the last film we discussed.
Yeah, so Jeffrey Katzenberg wanted to make a movie one way. Pixar wanted to make a movie another way. And was he fired or did he quit?
Let me look this up. We need to get Randall to do the fact checking.
Randall! Where's the Randall? I'm looking it up too. It's a race between you, me, and Randall to see who.
Yeah. Well, I know Katzenberg wanted to be the president of Disney, but Michael Eisner said no.
And that was probably the best call.
Yeah.
Best thing Michael Eisner did in his career. Outside of giving...
Eisner, love him or hate him, did do a lot of things. And if I can recommend a YouTube channel, Defunct Land. They do videos on theme parks. There's a whole Shakespearean story arc of Michael Eisner told throughout those videos. But, so was Katzenberg fired?
So what I'm reading is he was forced to resign. So basically fired, but not in the technical sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, Disney, the mouse got rid of him, and he founded DreamWorks with a few other people.
Yeah.
Because DreamWorks' name is officially DreamWorks SKG. The S is for Steven Spielberg, the K is for Katzenberg. Was the G for...
David Geffen.
Ah. That makes sense. I was thinking George Lucas, but no, he helped found Pixar.
Yeah.
So yeah, those three set up DreamWorks, and Katzenberg pretty much took all the notes he had about an upcoming Pixar film called A Bug's Life and said, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to get it out before them. Haha.
Yeah. Honestly, I think the behind-the-scenes story of A Bug's Life versus Ants is way more interesting than either of those films.
Oh, for sure. Like, I haven't even seen Ants all the way through, but we'll just say it wasn't holding my attention.
Yeah.
So, Katzenberg basically starts whipping the DreamWorks team into shape. Whip. Making them make this movie super fast. They call it Ants with a Z.
With a Z because 1998.
That is the edgiest thing you can do in the 90s, is replace an S with a Z.
Hey kids, let's change this thing with an S to a Z. Isn't that extreme?
I wish that version of Edge would come back as opposed to the one we have now.
Yeah. Do you bleed? I actually like that film in some ways.
Yeah, you've told me. Well, back to this film.
Yeah.
So, Ants gets made, and it gets released a couple of weeks ahead of A Bug's Life.
Yeah, but there was a fight over the release date.
Yeah, they kept trying to move up to outdo each other, and eventually it settled on Ants coming out before A Bug's Life.
Yeah.
And I'm going to look up the box office of those two movies and see which one ended up doing better. Because I don't think I ever learned that information. And now that we're doing this podcast, I feel like it should be information I have in my head. Okay, so you want to guess which one did better?
Well, I mean, I kind of know, but I don't know the specifics.
So it is utter domination for A Bug's Life. It swept.
Yeah.
Despite coming out a few weeks later, it steamrolled Ants.
Yeah.
So domestically, Ants made $90 million, and worldwide it made $171 million.
I see.
A Bug's Life domestically made $162 million. Worldwide, $363 million. So, it did not pay off for Katzenberg at all. Especially since Ants had a budget of $105 million.
Yeah. But I think eventually Katzenberg would kind of get his revenge.
Yeah, eventually. That boy, he never stopped trying, that's for sure.
He is a being of pure spite.
Jeffrey Katzenberg is just the incarnation of spite wearing a human skin suit.
Yeah. I'm reading this here. It was clear that Lasseter and Jobs believed the idea was stolen by Katzenberg. Katzenberg stayed in touch with Lasseter after the acrimonious Disney split, often calling to check up. In October 1995, when Lasseter was overseeing post-production work on Toy Story at the Universal Lots Technicolor facility at Universal City, where DreamWorks is also located, he called Katzenberg and dropped by with Stanton. When Katzenberg asked what they'd be doing next, Lasseter described what would become A Bug's Life in detail. Lasseter respected Katzenberg's judgment and felt comfortable using it as a sounding board for creative ideas. So at this point, they were still kind of amicable, despite all the stuff that went down and the stuff that will go down. Lasseter had high hopes for Toy Story, and he was telling friends through the computer animation business to get cracking on their own films. Quote, if this hits, it's going to be like space movies after Star Wars for computer animation companies, he told friends. I should have been wary, Lasseter later recalled. Jeffrey kept asking questions about when it would be released.
Yeah, that pretty much sums up what happened.
Yeah.
Katzenberg took some trust, twisted it, and stole a movie idea.
Yep. Oh, Lasseter publicly dismissed Ants as, quote, a schlock version of A Bug's Life.
Okay, sure. I mean, I know he has to for marketing and legal reasons, but come on, man. You made a schlock version of A Bug's Life.
Yeah. So you almost can't talk about one of these films without talking about the other.
It is very difficult. I feel like... So I already mentioned I haven't seen Ants all the way through. I mostly just was bored by its attempt to be a war movie. Because, like, come on. I understand Ants, like, have, like, massive, epic battles. I've seen those Curse Gazette videos, but you're not going to make an interesting version of that for kids.
Yeah.
Because you can't be edgy like you want to be edgy. Not when you're making a kids animated film in the 90s.
Yeah. Oh man, Hollywood is something else.
It really is. You know, there was one part of that quote you were reading that did kind of interest me. Lasseter saying that it would be like space movies after Star Wars if Toy Story like hit it big.
Yeah,
it did. I think that's an understatement of what happened. Because, like, you look at space movies today, and they're not the only type of sci-fi movie being made.
Yeah.
Whereas... everyone
wanted a piece of the computer animation pie.
Oh, yeah. Even companies that, like, don't really make CG films, like, Leica is pretty much stop motion and CG smashed together.
Yeah.
Like, they just do it because it is much, much easier to rely on both when you're trying to make a stop motion film.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, Disney's hand-drawn department died. It's been probably 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, Princess and the Frog was what, like 2009?
Yeah, it's been a decade since a hand-drawn Disney animated film.
Man.
Like, Toy Story really lit the fuse, but I think A Bug's Life was probably the one that helped solidify Pixar in a way.
Well, there's a really interesting video by YouTuber Rebel Taxi who did a video on how it was partially Nickelodeon that killed.
Like, just kind of flooding the market with cheap 2D films, so everybody wanted to see 3D after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were kind of responsible, but Like, in many ways, I don't know if CG would have been seen as anything other than a one-time novelty if A Bug's Life hadn't done well.
Yeah, it solidified this wasn't just a fluke or a gimmick.
Because, like, Pixar was mostly developing Toy Story 2 as a straight-to-DVD sequel until
Yeah.
they had enough confidence in it. And, like, if A Bug's Life had absolutely bombed, then they probably would have kept that as a, DVD sequel. Like, maybe this won't work out. Maybe Monsters, Inc. and Finding Nemo and all those still get made, but probably much later down the line, probably with much longer gaps between them.
Well, I personally find it interesting that a lot of the ideas for those films came about during one meeting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember from the WALL-E trailer.
Yeah. That they came up with the ideas for Bugs Life, Monsters, Inc.,
Cars.
Cars was later. Finding Nemo was one of them. But it all came from one meeting. That core group of creators.
Yeah, that would have been, at that time, John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, Pete Docter. I'm willing to bet Lee Unkrich was in there.
Probably.
Because Unkrich, he didn't really start out writing Pixar films. It's pretty interesting. He was mostly their editor.
Yeah.
Like, he was the editor on Toy Story and A Bug's Life, bringing it back to this movie so we don't get lost.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until he was elevated to co-directing status on Toy Story 2 that he really became a part of that core. Well, and I'm not going to purport to understand what Pixar's core group was like in the 90s. Like, he was probably definitely a big part of these movies for sure. But, but yeah, it definitely felt like Pete Docter, Andrew Stanton, and John Lasseter were the big three of Pixar at the time.
Yeah, they were on the same wavelength.
Yeah, they were making all the movies together.
The Brain Trust, I think they're called.
Pretty much. And it's going to be interesting to see what Pixar does now that there's just Pete Docter from the original group.
Well, Andrew Stanton's still a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, he's there in a capacity where he's like mostly a consultant. And Lee Unkrich like had his hand in so many films that it'll be years before we see one without some of his influence.
Yeah.
But like it's mostly Pete Docter there now, and because a lot of the other guys just moved on.
Yeah.
Or did some real sexual harassments and got fired.
Yeah.
Lasseter.
Yeah.
Looking at you.
Right at you.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
What a group of individuals.
Yeah, and like I was saying earlier, I really do feel like A Bug's Life is the one that solidified everything about this team, about this company, because you could do a bunch of short films, you could do a one-off feature, but if you can't make lightning strike twice, then you're kind of done in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Because Pixar wasn't owned by Disney at this point, so like if they had bombed this, then they'd be out of a lot of money.
Yeah, and during the whole Circle 7 drama, they were looking for other studios to partner with. It wasn't a done deal.
Yeah, they were definitely figuring everything out, and it is good of A Bug's Life that it really stuck this landing. I feel like they could have probably made a better film and hit it out of the park even stronger. But
yeah.
But I mean, they didn't need another miracle like Toy Story. They needed a good, solid base hit, and I think A Bug's Life gave them that, even if I'm, not crazy about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I've covered most of my notes on this film now. Do you have any that you want to talk about?
I feel like I kind of said all there really needs to be said about this one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just noticed at the very bottom I have one more.
Okay.
One more little morsel that I want to talk about.
All right, go on
And that is the meme.
the meme.
Yes. So, in the blooper credits, they do the whole "To Infinity and Beyond" shtick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it, like, how crazy must that be that your only other film thus far like has a line so iconic that you can meme it in your next film 3 years later, like, and expect people to like be, oh, I get the reference.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, like I think that line more than anything else about this film really is a time capsule of how big Toy Story was.
Yeah. I mean, how often does that happen?
I can't think of any other examples off the top of my head. It's just kind of impressive to me in a big way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my last note. I think I've said all I need to say on the Buggo movie.
The Buggo movie.
Buggo movie. I'm not particularly upset that they haven't done a nostalgia cash grab sequel on this one.
Yeah.
Because I probably would enjoy it about as much as I enjoyed it the first time around.
Yeah.
So, I think that about covers A Bug's Life.
Yeah, it's so.
Hey, we got it.
There we go. Yeah.
So, next week will be one of the best Pixar movies. I think it's fair to say.
For sure.
And in a catalog like theirs, like that's not a small thing to say.
Yeah.
And it's also nice that we will not really have a weak Pixar film again until we talk about Cars.
Yeah. And even then, I don't think that one's all that bad.
No, I mean, like, I don't think A Bug's Life is all that bad. At least not anymore. I don't think that. So
yeah.
It's just, I mean, when you build a skyscraper and then you build a dinky little hut next to it, like, one of them's gonna be negatively compared to the other.
Yeah.
And that's A Bug's Life. It's a dinky little hut. It's got its charm. It's all rugged and cool, but there's freaking skyscrapers surrounding it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been Daniel.
And Jarron.
And this was To Infinity and Beyond. Again, I'm really happy that A Bug's Life was promoting our podcast.
Absolutely.
21 years before it came out.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you, A Bug's Life, but we're not going to talk about you anymore.